people don't know this, but I also kind of unofficially babysat for Liam Gallagher. I babysat Gene, his son.
These stories. That's awesome.
It's not officially, but kind of. I'm on Much Music because of Oasis, I think.
Hi, my name's Sarah, and this is my sister Katie.
And we just want to remind everybody that girls like rock too.
Katie and I have had the honor and the privilege of having our first guest speaker be the one and only George Stroumboulopoulos.
Sarah and I have often talked on our podcast series about Much Music. And if you're not from Canada, that was Canada's equivalent to MTV. And Sarah and I, like I'm sure many millennials in Canada, grew up just having Much Music on the TV 24/7. For me, personally, Much Music introduced me to some of my favorite bands of the early 2000s, like Green Day and Blink-182.
Yeah, as well, more like alternative bands that I don't think I would have known otherwise. And a big one that comes to mind is Placebo.
Placebo. Sarah loved The Wedge.
Yeah, The Wedge was an alternative music show on Friday nights, and they would play a lot of more obscure music coming out of like the UK and the States. I loved The Wedge. I found out a lot of new music from there.
Yeah. So we grew up, as I said, with Much Music on all the time in our house.
Huge part.
Yeah. And we just loved watching George Stroumboulopoulos as a VJ.
Yeah, he was so great.
Yeah. He interviewed some of our favorite bands, and he just had this way about him that he had people's, I feel like their walls broke down, and he just really showed us what these artists were like that we knew and loved.
Yeah, he was so genuine, which will come out in the interview.
Yes. Yes. So we had the pleasure of speaking with George for over an hour. Super nice guy. If it's possible, now I admire and like him even more. So we hope that you guys enjoyed this interview as much as Sarah and I enjoyed going through with it.
Check it out.
Hi, George. And
Hello.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be with you both. Thank you for having me.
Oh,
thank you
course.
so much. Yeah.
So, George, you do have the honor of being the first ever guest speaker on the Girls Like Rock 2 podcast. And,
I'm the first one? What do you mean?
You are the very first one.
You don't interview people?
We haven't interviewed people yet. So we've been doing the podcast for just over a year now. And honestly, one of the things we really discovered from doing this podcast is we love hearing the comments from people and just the community that it brings talking about music.
Mm-hmm.
So what jumped to mind for us to have a guest speaker is George Stroumboulopoulos, because we often talk about Much Music growing up, millennials in Canada. And we were like, let's have a former Much Music VJ, and like, not to knock the other ones, they were great too, but you were our favorite Much Music VJ.
Thank
Yeah,
you. Well,
oh,
I'm happy to be
definitely.
here.
For
I'm
sure.
happy to be here. Thanks for this.
That's awesome.
Thank you.
So before we really dive into talking to you about music and your musical preferences and your career, like, as you can tell, we just need to have a fangirl moment because we are just really big fans. Yeah. Sarah, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, you've had such a prolific career, George, but your time at Much was so memorable, especially for us. Katie and I watched Much Music religiously during our teenage years, and you were like one of the main faces of throughout all of high school.
Yeah.
And you really created a distinct alternative space on Much Music, and just helped shape how we got into music. And that really meant a lot for our generation, especially if you were into rock music.
I'm happy to hear that. Thank you. I wasn't supposed to be on it that much. In fact, I didn't, when I grew up, I didn't have cable, so I didn't grow up watching Much Music. There was a guy down the street who had cable, and he didn't have Much Music, but on the weekends, when Much first launched, there was a thing called the free weekends, where all these new channels, there was a sports channel, all this other stuff, Much Music was one of the new channels. So on the free weekend, the cable providers would give access to these channels. So we would all show up at my friend's house because her dad had this. And so we would watch Much Music on the weekends just for that one weekend that it was available, and then it would be gone again and we didn't see it. So when I was working in radio in the 90s, I could barely afford rent and food, never mind cable. So I didn't even have cable, and I didn't watch much music. So when Much Music eventually offered me the job, I think Denise Donlin wrote about this in her book, where she said she had asked me in the interview, "Why do you want to be a VJ?" And I said, "I don't." Like, what are you talking
Oh,
about?
really?
Yeah, because you guys called me. I didn't apply for this job, and because I love music so much, right? That, and I love, to your point about rock and alternative. I didn't see a lot of it necessarily, at least not the kind that I listened to, represented. Although that was mostly because I wasn't really watching. And so when I got the Much Music show, I was only supposed to host the new music. So that's once a week, half an hour.
Right.
What happened was my deal with them, I said to them, I will come work here if you let me host Loud, the metal show. Because in my head, I knew I was going to do Loud and then create a punk show. And they said, "That's what you want?" I said, "That's what I want." They said, "No problem." And then, so that was, Monday nights, Saturday nights, and Monday nights. What happened was I was at work one day, and I had been doing this for a long time in radio, so I had interviewed a lot of bands, and I just had a lot of experience of being in the game, in the scenes. So what happened was they needed people to interview bands for the Rapid Facts show at the time. So the producer, a guy called Dan, would just say, "Hey, does anybody want to interview this band?" And I'd say, "Yeah, I'll do it," because I knew the band. So I just said yes all the time because I interviewed all these bands. I knew them. And one day I was at work after having done a bunch of my interviews, which were already airing on that show. And the host of that show, I guess, was in a contract situation, and she just walked out.
Oh, wow.
And the producer walked out and said to me, "Can you host Rapid Facts in half an hour?" or something like that. And I said, "Sure." And that's how I got on TV all the time. That was not the plan. So I think we did 4 or 5 Rapid Facts, Much News hits a day. So I was just on all the time. But that wasn't the plan. That wasn't the plan. Most of my career, friends, it's not gone according to plan. That's for sure.
Yeah. I find the older I get, the more I
Usually.
realize that with life.
How it goes. Yeah, definitely.
No, Sarah and I are
better.
just laughing because with knowing that you'll be on our show, we went down the rabbit hole of YouTube, looking up old Much Music stuff and obviously stuff on you. And I mentioned Rapid Facts.
You did.
I
you
did.
did.
And
Yeah.
then Sarah
Yeah.
mentioned new music. Who was it you saw him interviewing?
Placebo.
Placebo.
Yeah. So it's funny with Placebo. So before Placebo, like in 1990, maybe 9, before I was working at Much Music, Placebo came by the radio station that I was working at, the Edge. So
Love
they
The
were
Edge. We
brand
love
new.
The Edge.
Yeah. So it was a rock station in Toronto, and so I interviewed Placebo there, and Brian and I got along really well. And so when I went to Much, it made perfect sense. But yeah, I was a big Placebo fan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's awesome. So just you saying you and Brian got along really well. This is why Sarah and I were just so inspired by you, because you just seem to have this personality where musicians, which, like, not knocking musicians, but some can be a bit eccentric, maybe hard to get along with.
Totally.
But you just seem to be able to break this wall and just get people to open up and talk to you.
Sometimes, yeah. I sometimes it doesn't work and it blows up dramatically. That's for sure happens. But I think it's funny. Brian said something to me years later when they first came to Canada on that Placebo tour. It was the 90s. Howard Stern was they had brought Howard Stern on the radio in Toronto. So you had a lot of radio programmers and radio DJs who wanted to follow that lead. Obviously, if it's not obvious, it became obvious. I have zero interest in following anybody's lead. I would much rather do it my own way, whether it works or not.
That's
I don't
another
care.
thing we love about you.
Yeah. And sometimes it doesn't work and it backfires on me, and I don't care because I'm cool with my choices for the most part. So what happened was the guys in Placebo told me flat out they did radio in Toronto in the 90s, and they just ran into a lot of Toronto DJs who were homophobic and shock jockey and who couldn't wrap their head around fluidity. And I was by no means the most progressive guy. I didn't know anything. I was just a kid, but I knew enough to not be that, right? Like I was just a young boy, but I knew that the idea is to make people feel seen and safe and welcome rather than try to get over on them. That's never been my bit. So I think what happened for me is I was never so interested in the job that I was going to change who I was for the job. I was, again, imperfect, young, dumb radio guy. Said lots of stuff I'm sure I don't stand by now, but certainly 80s and 90s for sure. But what happens is you just decide who's the kind of person you want to be, and then will you betray that for the job? And I could never say yes to that second question. And so so not every musician likes me, but no musician can ever say I'm pretending. Right. And that's, I think, the biggest thing. So if you just show up as yourself and without pretense, and that's what Brian had said to me. He said he thought that there was no pretense to our conversation. And they were afraid when they first walked in. They weren't sure how it was going to go because they were burned by some DJs in Toronto on the radio. And some of them are still working. Some of them are not. But I remember that thinking, what do you mean there's no pretense? Of course there would be no pretense. And then it sort of dawned on me that not everybody is themselves. And I'm myself, for better or for worse, often both.
No, and that's that's awesome and good for you because you've stayed yourself and you've had a over 30-year long career now.
Yeah, I think what year are we in now? Are we 2026? My first shows, my college radio shows were in 1991. So,
That's a long time ago.
God, yeah, 35 years. Jesus, that's a long time.
Oh, I know. It's crazy. Well, so again, looking up old footage of you, I remember you starting on Much Music, and like Sarah said, you were this cool new alternative guy. But my first vivid memory of you on Much Music is interviewing Green Day on the Intimate and Interactive show.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Okay, so I hadn't watched that in years. I watched it when I was 13 when I first watched it, and like watching it as an adult, I said to Sarah, like, I felt kind of sorry for you. Like they were just kind of wild.
Totally, I loved it.
Do you remember the moment Trey Cool put you on his shoulders and lifted you up? Like, do you remember that?
No, I totally forgot about that. So you know what happened earlier in that day? I was standing outside doing a Much News hit, promoting the fact that Green Day was going to come up. Trey walked up to me and was looking for a head shop. A head shop in the 80s and 90s in Toronto and early 2000s where you buy T-shirts, fake IDs, drug paraphernalia, whatever you needed, right?
Okay.
Right.
Trey was looking for a head shop. My guess is he was trying to score something, but I don't know. He asked me where the nearest one was, and I told him it was, a minute away. It was a minute, like I said colloquially. He said, "Can I walk there?" I said, No. He said, "All right, how do I get there?" And I looked at him. I said, "Do you know how to ride a motorcycle?" And he said, "Yeah." So I just gave him the keys to my motorcycle and my helmet, and he hopped on my bike and he took off, and he did not come back. He was gone for a long time. The band and the tour manager started to get really nervous, and sort of the Much Music. And the tour manager looked at me like, "What did you do? Why'd you give him your bike?" And I said to him, "He's your band. He's your drummer. Like, don't come at me. He's a grown man, sort of." We say we were grown men, but we were not. We were just young men. And that's a very big difference between a young man and a grown man. And I have learned since I've become a grown man. But so that whole day was filled with, I don't know where Trey Cool is. I don't know if he dumped my motorcycle, if he crashed it. I don't know where he is. And so by the time he got back, much, much, much later than he should have, people were really tense and ready. I was laughing because I just thought it was punk and I didn't care. But so when by the time that show happened, I had already interviewed Green Day a bunch of times. I knew the guys. I knew how volatile it was going to be. I've been in hotel rooms with them when Trey and Billy Joe start wrestling and everything's starting to get broken and they're rolling all over the place. So it's been fun. I really enjoyed Green Day a lot, and they were always really, really, you never knew how it was going to go, but it was always going to be funny. And that was my bit. If it was always going to be funny, I can handle anything else. But I forgot he lifted me on his shoulders. That whole interview, like I felt sorry for you just because it was loud and they were you didn't really know how they were going to answer their question. Yeah. It'd be goofy. Yeah.
You just kept your cool. I'm like, oh my gosh, like that could have gone so wrong. I said to Sarah, like, George could have like fallen back into the drunk kid.
Yeah. You know what's funny about that? When I think about that Much Music era, those were essentially my first TV shows. So I had never really been on TV. When I got to Much Music at the end of '99, I had done one comedy series that I was the host of this comedy series, but I was a last minute host, much like Much News, Rapid Facts, because the host who they had left. And so the production was stuck. And so they asked me if I would do it. And I said, sure. So I went out and did those shows. But I think I did like 4 or 5 episodes. That's all we did. And it was not live. So I'd never done television really until I got to Much Music. So all those things that were going on, you could see me trying to figure out, like in real time, trying to figure out what to do. Another gigantic character flaw that I have of the many is that I am present. I am present. So when stuff like that happens, I just stay right there in the moment, and I kind of don't care about the TV aspect. I don't care about any of the stuff going on. I don't care about how I'm perceived. I'm just in the moment with those guys, and I'm enjoying it as much as they are. And sometimes I'm enjoying it, but I'm aware that this could go terribly wrong. And so I'm sort of trying to process as many things as I can at the same time. But yeah, I totally forgot that Trey was carrying me around. God, those guys are so wild.
Like I said, you handled the whole conversation well, and you seemed to have a great time. And it was just interesting watching these clips again, because Much Music, the title of the show was Intimate and Interactive. And it was just so loud, and the fans were there.
Oh, for sure.
And
crazy.
Also,
crazy.
When you were at the Edge, I remember that too, when the Edge used to be on Young, and they would open the doors and people could just come in and see their favorite musicians. Yeah.
It's the first time I met Green Day. They showed up early for their interview. I wasn't interviewing at the time. I had just started. So I was doing overnight shows, and I was handing out tickets during the day at the studio. So they came in. They were young too. And they had bought these little tiny military men with parachutes, and they had food, and they were just throwing them in the air and causing trouble. And it was really, really, and I remember one of the older, still in their 20s, DJs feeling a little bit destabilized by their behavior. But I was young enough and dumb enough to think it was funny. So I just kind of rolled with it the whole time. I think growing up listening to metal and punk put me in a position where when things were disruptive, I felt at home. I come from a little bit of chaos, a lot of chaos. So I feel at ease when things are chaotic. I feel at ease now always. And I would prefer things not to be chaotic, but I'm good at chaos. And so when I'm watching stuff just collapse around us on the air, I'm just smiling to myself thinking, wicked. Let's see where this goes.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a great attitude and vibe to have in the career you have, because when you're interviewing people, it's true. Like, you don't really know what could happen.
Yeah, I forgot Intimate Interactive was always live.
It was live. It was loud. I think it was Trey dropped the F-bomb at one point. I'm sure the producers at Much loved that.
I remember I was about to do a big live at Much, similar to that, I with Kid Rock. This is when Kid Rock was a different version of himself that he is now. Kid Rock put on some of the most insane shows, epic shows, really fun shows. And Bob Ritchie's Kid Rock I knew him in the 90s when he was honestly one of the loveliest, nicest people you could spend time with. He was one of the best people to interview. He was so professional, but he was also just there. Like Kid Rock, whatever switch happened in Kid Rock, that's the journey, I guess, of a lot of people. But he wasn't this guy back then.
Yeah, right.
And I remember being in the upstairs in one of the kind of second floor offices in the Much Music building, where the boardroom was. That's where Kid Rock's green room was. So I was just sitting there hanging out with them. We were talking, getting ready for the show. And in walks the boss. And the boss says to him, "Hey, listen, Bob, if it's okay with you, we got a lot of kids watching. I think it'd be great if you don't swear on the show tonight. I think swearing, there's better ways of using language." And I was thinking to myself, why would you do that? Why would you tell him that? Why would you tell him that? He's gonna. So he said, absolutely, absolutely. I totally understand. Amazing. And then the boss left, and Bob just looked at me and he just winked, and I just went, oh boy. And he says, "Do you care what I do?" And I said, "I don't care what you do, man. I don't care what you do. You got to be you." That's what I said. And then he went on the air, and away we go. Just let her rip. You never tell a musician. nowadays most musicians who are in the because I worked at Apple Music for a long time.
Yes.
Most of the musicians in the modern era, labels, everybody's playing along. Everybody's doing the thing. They're in the business. They're all a brand. Everybody's the game now, right? Back then, it was not like that. Back then, artists were artists. And now it's a commodity, which I understand it was always a commodity, but there were, in rock and roll particularly, and Kid Rock was doing rock and roll, hip hop hybrid back then, but rock and roll, and it's probably the reason why that's still the genre I listen to the most, the kind of loud guitars, is I want my musicians to be disruptive. I don't want, like, burgers are great, right? Burgers are great. But do I want a fast food burger? Sometimes. That's when I listen to something that's in the industry. Generally, I want something that's its own thing. And that's where I prefer my artists to be. So now everybody behaves and everybody bows down to the artist and everything is just, whatever you want. And it's become really just a pop publicist, manager, label, media wheel. Everybody works together to move. It didn't used to be like that. So Bob and I were both disruptors inside our own building. Right. And I think that was really, really, and the people who hired me to work at Much Music, even the person who asked Kid Rock not to swear, was also a disruptor. So you just put a whole bunch of misfits together and you try to make it work. And sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. And that's kind of the key, I think, to Much Music. I'll meet a lot of people who will ask about those days and why we don't have anything like that now. It's because if you're not a misfit, where are you going to, what are you doing? Everybody's so socially conscious. Everybody's so, not socially conscious, but social activism, but they're so conscious about their place in society, where back then it was so much more about rebellion. And I don't see nearly as much. And the rebellion today is just rebelling against the easy stuff. But the real proper rebellion, Much Music, every day I interview an artist and you just did not know how it was going to go. I would interview 3 bands a day for long stretches. And that's why I got to interview so many people. And I'm so grateful for that. But you didn't know. You'd interview Scott Weiland one day, who was so out of his mind on heroin that you're like, I don't know what's going to happen. And then I remember interviewing the Prime Minister of Canada, and when the interview was over, shook his hand, did the bit, left the building, got in a Much Music truck, drove up from Queen and John up to the Lee's Palace, where I interviewed an artist called Genesis Peorage, who was reconstructing their face to look like their partners. And different teeth. And this is like half an hour after I interviewed the Prime Minister. So if you were just bopping around all the time doing unbelievable stuff. And so most places are just too terrified to let that happen. And most people I come across in the business are too terrified to be that free. Most, not all, but most. And most media is so whack now compared to, and Much was an anomaly for sure, but to a degree, so was The Edge. So we had a couple of little weird anomalies in Canada at the time.
Well, yeah, like Sarah and I just remember growing up living like an hour and a half from Toronto. It was such a treat to go to Toronto and you could actually stand at Much Music. And if you were lucky enough, do you remember when the Vines was there?
Yes, we went out.
We could take our little pictures with our cameras.
I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. Oh my God, that's so great. Well, this is it. I'm a big believer in the audience has to be able to get close to their favorite artists. And it's why I did House of Strombo at my house. And I let strangers into my place where I live, because you need to be close to your favorite bands. You need to be.
Oh, man. So we did want to touch base on House of Strombo because that's one of your later projects. We don't want you to think that we only focused on you in the Much Music days. We've kept up with your career.
You can talk about whatever you want. If you didn't know a single thing I did after Much Music, that'd be fine too. I wouldn't be worried about it at all.
Oh man, George, you're just being cooler and cooler now. Like,
No.
Our fangirl moment is just lasting.
Well, I appreciate that, but Much Music was so special that I could talk about it for days.
Okay, that's good, because that's what we wanted to dive into.
So speaking of Much then, and I do want to talk about House of Strombo after, Sarah's dying to know about your meeting with Oasis.
So we're huge Oasis fans here, and we have a lot of huge Oasis fans that listen in. Yeah. And we know that you've interviewed Oasis, Noel Gallagher, a few times. So Much, and I know also your time at CBC with The Hour. And Katie and I would love to know your experiences meeting Oasis, meeting Noel Gallagher, and yeah, just how that went and like, did you
I
prepare for that or
also
just kind of go
I
with it?
also people don't know this, but I also kind of unofficially babysat for Liam Gallagher. I babysat Gene, his son.
These stories.
That's awesome.
It's not officially, but kind of. The It's funny you bring it up. I'm on Much Music because of Oasis, I think. So when Much Music first sniffed around to ask me if I wanted to work there, I went to meet with somebody, good dude, liked him, but I didn't, like I said, I didn't really have any interest to work at Much Music, so I worked at the Edge. And I loved the Edge, and that was it. And so one day, it was months and months and months later, this guy was hanging around the studio for a long time during one of my shows, a long, long time. And I was, as you can tell by how I am here, I'm a pretty easygoing, accessible guy. So what I would do
Sure,
is
I would say. Yeah.
I would unhook all the posts and the ropes, the stanchions that would keep kids away from the studio
Oh, that's
inside
awesome.
that Young Street, and they would just come in. Everybody, kids, adults, would just hang around at the desk with me, and we would do the show there. I just thought it was more exciting. I thought it was more fun. And so one day there was this dude that hung around for hours until the end of the show. And at the end of the show, everybody left. I was closing up. I had a key to lock the studio, and this guy walks up to me and he said his name was David Kynes. And I recognized David Kynes' name because at Much Music at the time on the scroll, David Kynes was one of the bosses. And he
Okay.
said, so, like, do you want to work there or what? And I'd forgotten about Much Music as that I even had that meeting. And I said, oh yeah. And I guess they weren't used to somebody not begging for a job in the same way. Like I wasn't chasing that job at all. I had forgotten about it. That he said, just come and meet, And I said, okay. That's when I went in and had that meeting and said, you guys asked me. And they said, do you have anything on tape? And I'm like, no, I don't. I didn't have a camera. I didn't have a camera for most of my childhood. There was a handful of photos of me from when I was young, but that's because somebody had a camera, but we didn't have a camera in my family. So I remember, I don't even think I had a cell phone. Maybe I had just gotten my first cell phone at that time. I had a pager. And
Pager.
he said, do you have anything on tape? I said, I don't have anything on tape. He said, we'd love to see something on tape. Actually, no, this is before that meeting. Sorry. So this is before my meeting. So they said, can you film something that you do next? And I said, sure. So this is before they brought me in to meet them. And I had an interview booked and I said, sure. So I called a friend. I said, can you just film this? And they said, no problem. And I sent that tape in to Much. And then they called me in and said, hey, we'd love to offer you the job. Actually, I'm getting the timeline a bit messed up. He met me in the place. I filmed the interview. They met with me and they offered me the job that day. But the interview I filmed was Oasis, was Noel Gallagher. It was
Really?
Noel was playing Who Feels Love in the studio with me. And so then when I went to Much Music, I got the Noel Gallagher interview with Oasis where I asked him a question and I went on with no notes. I had no notes and I asked him a question. And at the end of the interview, the boss walked up to me, the one, David, and he said to me, you had no notes on you. I said, no, I didn't. He said, really? And I said, yep. He said, why not? And I said to him, if I can't interview Oasis without notes, I probably shouldn't have this job because this is Oasis and this is me. So now that was a bit dumb for me to say because everybody has their own process, but that was for me. I was talking about me specifically. Yeah. And then I'd asked Noel one question. He said, where'd that question come from? And I said, I just wondered it. And he looked at me and went, it's a good question. And he walked away. And from then on, I had pretty much freedom at Much Music. For this, it was Noel Gallagher. Noel and I have had some of the most, now because of social media, they're circulating around again.
Yeah.
And there was one interview where I was really grilling Noel and I wasn't listening to his bullshit. I wasn't having it. And at one point he looks at me, he's like, what are you talking about? And I totally forgot about that interview, but I just saw it where my face is just looking at him like this. Come on. And I just didn't believe him. So Noel and I we've had a lot of really good stuff. But years later, Ms. Appleton was shooting a show inside the CBC building when I was doing the talk show. And So Gene was just a young, he's like maybe 8 years old, maybe 9 years old.
Yeah.
And he had to be on set while his mom was working all the time and he was bored. And I was, young rock and roller doing the talk show. So Gene would leave the studio where his mom was shooting, would just come down with a notepad, and he would just sit in my office when I was doing that late night talk show on CBC and I was prepping for the show. A lot of times during that season, Gene was just sitting there on my couch drawing or doing whatever, and me and the writers would come in and there's like Gene Gallagher's just sitting in the studio hanging around. So somewhere in this house, I don't know where it is, but somewhere when they finished their show and they were leaving, Gene drew me a thank you little doodle picture, and I have it somewhere in the house. I don't know where it is, but I have it somewhere. It's really funny. It's really cute. And then Liam comes into town and to see the kid and see his lady, and he just looks at me and he's like, "Hey, Mike, yeah, thanks for keeping an eye on the lad." That's what he says. Gives me a little thing. God, I love Oasis so much. I love Oasis so much.
Oh man,
Yeah.
Sarah and I most of our subscribers are from our Oasis content.
Yeah,
We
definitely.
just love Oasis.
Yeah, we grew up with them, and
They're the best.
remember you with Noel. So
Yeah.
They're the best. If you like Oasis, and different band, but I know that Oasis love these guys. One of my favorite bands of all time, and one of my favorite bands from that era, but they remain one of my favorite bands, is a Scottish band called Travis. And
We love Travis.
big fans of Travis too.
Yeah, love Travis. And so I will beat the drum for Travis all day long. I think Fran Haley's one of the greatest songwriters of all time. And I know that the Gallaghers and Noel and Fran get along quite well.
Yes. Yeah, Sarah actually saw Travis open for Oasis back in 2000.
First concert way back for
at Maple Leaf Gardens.
Standing on the Shoulder of Giants.
Yeah, I was at that show.
Were you?
Yeah.
Oh, man.
So I was at that show. So that's the interview that I did with Noel. That Standing on the Shoulder record that got me the Much Music thing.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So he was at the Edge Studios like that day or the day before. God, I love Oasis so much. And I remember when Oasis
love
came
it.
out, how much people
I love
hated
that.
them.
So, I apologize if you post on social media because I never caught when. Did you go to any of the reunion shows for Oasis?
No. I really wanted to, but I was filming a series called The Stories That Made Us, and it was
Okay, I
filming
heard
all
that.
summer. So I was traveling across the country nonstop, and and we were doing 18-hour days for over a
Yeah.
month. So I was never in the same, and I'm really bummed out by it. I think it was a mistake to not do that,
What can you do?
but I had a job. I had to shoot.
Yeah,
Exactly.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
No, and I mean you've had the ultimate. You've been able to interview Noel, and not only did you interview him, but he liked you. He complimented you.
Yeah. Noel and I
I
got
feel like
along.
he doesn't
Noel and I
even
got
like
along
everybody.
No.
well. Noel Gallagher, interviewing Noel Gallagher, the Oasis guys, and Trailer Park Boys, and Ozzy Osbourne. There's one thing that's in common with all those interviews. If it was an in the field interview, where as opposed to being in a studio, you could see the camera shake because the camera operator was laughing so hard.
Oh,
the
really?
camera operator would just, oh my God. The camera operator, Noel would be going off, and you could see the camera operator just going, laughing so hard and Ozzy was like that too. When Ozzy and Sharon used to fight, oh my Lord, it was so funny. So funny.
man.
And the camera was just constantly shaking.
I watched the reality show back in the day because
Oh,
the
gosh,
Osbournes
yeah.
kind of created the whole celebrity reality show, and they were very enjoyable to watch.
Yeah, definitely.
Incredible. I did a little mini tour with them once, and it was awesome. Being on a plane with them, watching them go, holy smokes.
Oh man, that's awesome. That's like true rock and roll love there.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So let's then dive a bit into House of Strombo because that's one
Right.
of your later projects now. And did you come up with this idea, or did it just kind of happen?
I was walking down Yonge Street in Toronto, and I walked by 228 Yonge and 204 Yonge. Those were the two locations where the Edge studio was. So I walked by it. They were gone. They were, I don't know, like a home goods store, a Dollarama version of a home goods store.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, man, I said, there's generations that are going to follow that have no idea that kids who were having a bad day showed up here and they got to talk to Trent Reznor in that room when I was there with them, or Chris Cornell, or Gavin Rossdale, or Gwen Stefani, or pick a band, right?
Oh, you just mentioned all of our favorite artists.
Yeah. And so then I was walking down Yonge Street. If some of your audience aren't from Toronto, if I were to paint a picture, I was walking south on Yonge Street. I made a right onto Queen Street, and it's a journey I've done a million times because I live at Queen of Bathurst and I've lived in this neighborhood for 30 plus years. And
Okay.
I walked down Queen Street and I walked past Much Music, and same thing. They had boarded up the windows and they're doing some other kind of
Yeah.
show, but it's
Yeah.
not a show that's about the community. It's a show that's about the studio. And I remember swearing out loud, saying, "You," and I used the word, "have no idea how hard people worked to make sure that Canadians and young Canadians had a place to go." I said that out loud to nobody. I just walked.
Yeah.
And then I said, "Eff it, I'm going to do it myself." So I called a friend of mine. I said, "Hey, I know what I'm going to do." I just walked by the Edge and I walked by Much Music. Both those places are closed. It's terrible. I mean, they exist, but they don't really exist the way they did.
Right.
Yeah.
Totally.
I have lots of thoughts as to why that would be. But the he said to me, "Oh, that's cool. Yeah, you should have bands in your house." And I said, "Yeah, it's not the bands, dude." "Yes, but I'm going to let the public in." And he said, "What?" I said, "I'm just going to go on my Instagram. I'm going to tell people if they want to see this band, holler at me and just come watch them in my living room." And everybody in my life said, "That is a dumb idea. Do not bring people into your homes." And I said, two things can be true. As I remember it, yeah, sure, it's dumb, but if not me, then who? Like, I'm going to do it. So I started doing it. We invited bands in and they started saying yes. And I was surprised that they said yes. And then, of course, the public wanted to come in. And we started doing this so long ago. So when I worked at Much Music, I did two things at my house. One with Buck 65 and one with Tegan and Sarah. So long before I ended up working, starting House of Strombo. This was in the early 2000s. So I had done it before, but not with an audience. And I decided just to start inviting people in. And then all of a sudden, bigger bands and bigger bands and bigger bands started saying yes. So I want to do it again. You know who I want to do it with? Is I want to bring House of Strombo back, but I want to partner with Much Music. Like, that's what
That'd
I
be
want to
cool.
do. I think that'd be
Wow.
super cool, you know?
That would be awesome.
Even though Much isn't what it was, that doesn't mean it can't be lots of things. And,
Yeah,
and I
totally.
still really respect that Much Music thing. So that's how House of Strombo started. It was just me being annoyed at the fact that the media, because again, I'm a lot older than you cats, but in the 70s and in the 80s in Toronto, CFNY, The Edge, and Q107 were these two radio stations that were absolutely about the community. But
Yes.
also,
Totally.
they held their artists to a standard. So they didn't work for the artists. They worked for the listener. The artists, in their mind, also worked for the listener. So what I was saying off the top about how everybody's kind of in on it together now, everybody's now about making sure, oh, is the artist and the label happy? That's not the way to do this. I don't think so. That's the problem with stan culture. Stan culture has ruined the music business, but it's also ruined sports business too. And I never looked at, I was grateful that the artists came to my house to play, but they were playing for the people in the room. And so
Yeah.
I said no to lots of bands who wanted to play here, big ones too, because I didn't think that they repped it. I didn't think
Oh,
they got it.
really?
Oh.
Yeah, man. Yeah, for sure.
Oh.
Because I'm not here making a promo video just like I am for you, but it ain't just for you. This is
Okay.
actually about the community. And musicians always tell me, oh, music matters. I'm like, you're totally right. Prove it.
Yeah.
If it matters just to you, then it matters a little bit. But it has to matter for it to matter. And I'm a bit of a jackass about that. And I don't play the other game where it's like, oh, look, we're all here to build the industry up. No, we're not. The industry will build if you take care of your audience. If you
Yeah.
take care of your audience, look at how much you two feel about Oasis now. And Oasis were a problem for the media and for their business and for their labels, but they understood their fans. And
Yeah.
one of the reasons why Noel and Liam and I got along is because we understood the assignment.
Yeah.
If you watch some of those interviews with Noel, I'm pushing him. And at one point he looks around at people in the room like, what's going on? Right? But it's like, no. And I said to him, no, we're doing this. And he was up for it because Noel's one of those guys. And
Yeah.
I'm a huge, so that was really the philosophical fire that that fueled and powered what House of Strombo was. It didn't come from, oh, I think it'd be cool. Because I'll tell you, it's a lot of work to
I
have
can only imagine.
100 people in a band and your floors are damaged. And, like it's a lot of work and it's expensive to do. But I believed in it. And I still do believe in it.
Yeah. Oh no, I think that's so cool. Like I watched the one with Billy Talent, and he's just like, we're like actually in George's house. Like it's not a studio; it is George Stroumboulopoulos' house.
Yeah, I looked at like the Kills and Franz Ferdinand.
Yeah. Oh God, Franz Ferdinand. Oh my God, I love that band. First time we brought an audience, and so I went down to Coachella one year, and I was watching one of my favorite bands, The Cult, play. And I had said we hadn't had anybody in the house yet. And I said to Ian Astbury from The Cult, said, "Hey man, I'm going to do a music concert series from my living room. I would love it if The Cult played," which is a crazy thing to say to one of your favorite bands in the world.
Yeah.
And Ian said, "Totally, we're in."
Oh wow!
And I went, "Okay, awesome." But I didn't know that they were actually going to do it because sometimes people say stuff to you and they don't mean it, right? Then I got a call from the label saying, "How come Ian Astbury is asking to play your house?" Wow. I said, "Oh, because I asked him to." They said, "Okay, well, he's in town this day. The Cult will do it." And I said, "Awesome, let's do it." Then I went, "Oh, we got to figure out how to do this." I had worked at Much Music, but nobody I was working with on the radio show had ever worked at Much Music, so they didn't know the mechanism of how to do this. There's a lot that goes on. So we didn't have security. We didn't have anything, right? So we started bringing bands in, filming them really small. I was at the time mixing the audio, done a terrible job, but I was just recording the band myself, running mics. I'd never done it. So we started filming it, and everybody started learning how to do it. And then one day I was in Ottawa, and I had to come to, and I knew that day this band was going to come to my house. So I went on Instagram. I think I did a story or maybe a post, and I said, "Hey, if you like this band or this era, send me an email. And you can be in Toronto between 1 and 2 today." So I got a bunch of emails. I think I capped it at 20. I was working with an amazing producer called Colton. And he texted me and he says, "Yeah, we got like lots of people asking to join." I said, "Tell them to meet me at this park in downtown Toronto." So I was flying. So I flew in from Ottawa, landed. I walked out to the park, and there was a bunch of people just standing there. And they were a bit surprised to see me. They were, "Oh my God, it's you." And I said, "Yeah." I said, "Let's go." So they followed me, and we walked, and I walked them into my house. And they said, "Where are we?" I said, "This is my home." And they said, "All right, really?" And I went, "Yeah." So they all just sat on my living room floor. We didn't really know what we were doing. They all sat on my living room floor. And there's like 30 people in my home. I don't know. And then I said, "All right, everybody say hi to Jimmy Eat World." And Jimmy Eat World came up from the basement and played a show for them. And
man,
I think
Jimmy
that was one
Eat
of
World
the
played in your house. I'm a big fan of Jimmy Eat World.
Yeah. I think if I want to make sure, I've had a lot of concussions. I'm pretty sure that Jimmy Eat World were the first band that we did where we invited the public in, people I didn't know, into the show, and they were so down and they were so great, man. And so Jimmy Eat World leads, and we practiced and did a band called Dilly Dally, whom I loved. We brought more people in, and we started learning more and more. And then the Cult came in, and then the Cult came in, and the Cult. We had asked the Kills to do it. Their team had said no, but we invited the Kills team to come to the Cult show.
Okay.
And they walked out and said, "This is awesome. We're doing it." And I had asked Behemoth to do it, that blackened death metal satanic band from Poland. And he said, "Sure." But he said to me later, I was never going to do it. But then he was on his own in Poland, and he saw the Cult performance on YouTube, and he loved the Cult. And so everything started to go. Ian Astbury is a brother of mine. He's a friend, and I owe a lot to him for saying yes. Because I still think we would have pulled it off, but we wouldn't have pulled it off the way we did if Ian didn't say yes to us and have the Cult do it.
That's amazing.
Man, we've only been talking for like 45 minutes, George, and like the stories you've given
I'm good.
us.
I'm good.
So cool.
You have me for another hour, or less, whatever you want.
Oh my God. Well, yeah. And like the thing is, your career is so long, and we know it goes beyond music. We just wanted to talk about music today, but
for sure,
the stories you have are just like, they're just so cool.
Yeah. That's so cool.
I feel so lucky that I got to not just be in it and meet these people, because meeting the people is whatever, but to make the kinds of stuff that would reach you.
Yeah.
Right. This is what this is about to me. It's funny it took me a long time to learn how to be an angry kid. Here's how I think about it. When you're an angry, busted up little kid, especially if you're a dude, male anger, but boy anger, that troublemaker kind of thing. Somebody once asked me, were you a troubled kid? And I was like, no, bro, I was a troubling kid. And it's a very big difference, right? So, but it took me a long time to realize that fire inside me, I could use it to burn down stuff, or I could use it to heat stuff up and make it better. And that transition was really crucial for me. And there's lots of reasons, and a lot of people who had no reason to care about me, but they did. The grace of others is why I think anybody kind of gets through this life in a lot of ways. The grace from people that have no reason to give you that grace. So I went from being this kid who loved and still do love, never mind the Bollocks and the Sex Pistols. So the Sex Pistols really, really moved me.
Yeah.
The Misfits made it darker and bridged my punk, but really the metal, because I love metal. And I liked the Clash, of course, but when I got to be about 13 and I started to really get into the Clash, so I was listening to Slayer, Venom, Metallica, the Pistols, the Clash, the Fits. And you can only listen to lyrics for so long before they'll impact you, hopefully. You'll either embrace them or run from them. And Joe Strummer became an important figure in my life. Joe was the punk rock Neil Young, and Neil Young remains a North Star for me. So I'm not anywhere near the person I am today if it isn't for these bands, right? And the transition from the Pistols into the Clash, and knowing the role the Pistols played in my life, important. But really it was the Joe Strummer thing, which is you got to be there for people, man. And he said something to me, Joe. I got to interview Joe. I got to hang out with him a couple times. What a treat. And Joe said, so many artists are trying to be timeless, and they're worried about being timeless. And he said, it's not your job to be timeless. It is your job to be there for your people of your time. The people will decide if you're timeless. You have to be there for them now. And that stays with me. That really stays with me.
That's a powerful statement.
That is powerful.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Joe was the greatest, man. Oh, Joe was the greatest. And then he said, and then I was watching his documentary, and there's a clip in there, which is from the interview I did with him, where he just talks about never forget you're alive. He said, it's so easy to say, but so many people are just wandering through this life and they're forgetting that it's the gift, and I'm a big believer that things don't have to be the way they are for you. You can change stuff, not everything, but lots of stuff, and enough to alter your path in some respects. And Joe taught me a lot. You just got to be better. You got to be better, and you got to be more involved in you and others being better. I wouldn't have that without Joe and those bands.
It's just, like Sarah and I have been huge music lovers since we were young. Like I said, I was 13 when I bought Green Day Warning, and doing this podcast, it's just, if it's possible, it's reignited my love for music even more. And just hearing you and your stories, and then reading comments from people who listen to our podcast, music is just so, it's amazing. Like
it is. It is.
I was born in the early 70s. So if I go from let's say 75, 76, I first remember hearing AC/DC and Pink Floyd when I was very, very young. But if you go from 77, 75, let's say, to 95, 20 years. And you start to look at what bands came out, what genres started, which subgenres started, just in a 20-year span. Every Tuesday when records would come out, every Tuesday, if you go back and look at all the Tuesdays in that period, every Tuesday is a band that changed the game. for
Yeah.
20 years. And you can even add to the, even 2000 pre-Instagram, like you get to 2005, you take that 30-year span.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Out of this world. There was 1997. We talk about 1991 for legitimate reasons, of course.
Yeah.
Go look at the records that came out in 1994.
Yeah.
The records that came out in
Yeah.
94.
Yeah. Yeah.
Crazy. It's crazy. Every week was 3, 5, 7. And these are just the records that we heard about. Now, in each community, we had all these independent bands. I've talked to lots of artists about this, it includes myself, where we're so heavily inspired by bands that no one will ever hear of because they only played in the church basements in our neighborhood, because we're from these little scenes and tape trading. So before everybody was sharing and could see what everybody was doing, we could only read Maximum Rock and Roll or Punk Planet, these zines, and you'd learn about stuff. And you'd try to you'd write a letter to Discord Records and try to order this one thing out of DC or Maryland. And so we were building little communities, and then people were sharing these tapes. It was before anything was big. I remember my friend calls me one day. His name was Jimmy. Jimmy's like, bro, I got a tape. You got to hear it. So he calls all of our friend group. We get in his car, beat up old car, the kind of car where the floor and the trunk are rotted out. So the fumes are in the car. And he puts on this cassette of this brand new band, and it was the first Rage Against the Machine tape.
Oh,
and
man.
we were just like, what the is this? Right? So it was just constantly, but it was word of mouth. It was somebody, because most of what we liked wasn't on the radio, right? Most of what we liked wasn't on the radio. And it wasn't until, 90, it really wasn't until Nirvana, Pearl Jam, Soundgarden, and Alice in Chains, where the bands we liked got on the radio. It really wasn't like that until then. Of course, the big ones, Neil and Joni and all that, and Rush. But it was somebody who had great taste who got a tape,
I know.
And we're so
really
lucky.
Cool about
we're so lucky
too, though. Oh, sorry. Talking about how back in the day, like you said, we didn't have the internet like we do now. You had to read zines and get mail stuff. But what's cool, I saw, like, apparently you helped Alexisonfire get really big because you wore their shirt, I believe, while you were at Much Music.
I saw them play live once. They hadn't made a video. I loved Alexis. And so I bought a shirt. And so I wore it on TV all the time. What I used to do at Much Music, and it was mostly on purpose. Sometimes it was, I was making no money and I live in, in a floor over here. So I would wear shirts on the air of bands that I loved, that I knew didn't have videos or wouldn't get played on Much Music, so that when I was doing that, some kid would watch the show and try to figure out what was the shirt I was wearing. So I wore a band called Jersey all the time, a band called Propaganda all the time. I wore, the Cut Off and Bombs Over Providence and all these bands that people may not have heard of, but I wanted them to hear about them, And so I would wear these shirts on purpose, knowing that if you're watching Much News, because sometimes on Much News we do news of some pop bullshit or whatever, and I don't like pop music. I never really have. A couple songs here and there, and so I can go back to some pop songs if they stand the test of time. I will argue that All Saints Never Ever is one of the great songs ever recorded. I love that song so much. I think Whitney Houston's cover of I Will Always Love You is a masterpiece beyond masterpiece. Her cover of the Dolly song.
It is. You can't deny that.
You can't deny it. I'm not a big fan of the, I want to dance with somebody. I get it, but they're not, but I Will Always Love You. Holy smokes. Yeah. So I knew that when I was talking about that stuff, I would also draw logos of bands on my arm, so that if I with just a Sharpie marker. So if I was doing a show, I usually draw a little message to my nephew, who was only, I think, 4 at the time. So if he watched, he would see I would message him on the arm, and then I would draw logos of punk rock bands on my arm, so that people would pick it up. And then so the Alexis thing, they. It's on my wall here. They ended up giving me one of their gold records.
Oh, cool.
From them, because awesome. They I got, it's funny, the only gold and platinum records I was given, I have them from Alexisonfire, Slipknot, and Coldplay. Those are the ones that they give. Cool. I love
so
Coldplay
random.
too.
I love it.
It's so
it's
random.
Really random.
But so Alexis, I wanted people to hear them. I believed in them. There's another band called Protest the Hero who went on to have a great career.
Yes, I remember them. Yeah.
Another band that I really tried to rap. A lot of these bands, man, like Bombs Over Providence, can't find their music anywhere. So I have to go through in my storage, I have a whole bunch of CDs in these boxes. I have to go through all my CDs to see if I can find some of these old CDs. I love those bands. But that's our job. Our job is to promote. That's our job.
Yeah.
Yep.
And you did a good job at that because Alexis
Yeah.
on Fire, they were heavily played on Much Music after a while.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, they were. And that's why they gave this to me, because they were grateful. They were a bit surprised. Somebody, I think, called them and said, dude, there's a guy on Much Music wearing an Alexis on Fire t-shirt on the air. And they went, what? I remember when Protest the Hero, I saw them. They were 14. I interviewed them on the radio when they were 14.
Wow.
They were amazing. They were talking about they were talking about Palestine then when they were 14. And I looked at this kid and I just went, yes, guy. Yes, guy. And I remember meeting their parents outside a venue one night, and their parents knew who I was. I had a TV show. And I said to them, it's not my job to tell you how to raise your kids. I'm not getting involved. I will say this. If you're wondering about their path, I can tell you that they have it. I don't know what you want from them. I don't know where they want to go. Not my place. But if you're wondering, is this just a thing that they like to do when they're young? Or is it real? I'm here to tell you it's real. This band can do this if they want. And they went on to have an amazing career. So when I left the Edge and went to Much Music, I remember wanting to have them on the show. So we drove, I think they were in Whitby or Oshawa. I don't know where they're from. I forget. But we went to their school with cameras to try to sneak them, get them to skip class to come out and to do interviews. Like we'd walk through the hallway just trying to find which class they were in to see if we can get them to skip class and do an interview with us.
I didn't realize they were that young when they started.
They're 15, 14 or 15 years. I met RF from Protest at a Warped Tour when he was 14, and he gave me a Led Zeppelin pin. He gave me a little Led Zeppelin pin before Protest, or Protest had just started. Yeah, they're amazing.
Oh man, Warped Tour. That's another thing of the 90s that I think they still do Warped Tour now, but I feel like it's just not the same as it used to be.
Yeah, well, I know I talked to Kevin, the founder of it, and it's a different business model now, so they can't do the kind of tour they did. But they're still doing it.
Yeah.
You know, people don't realize is that Katy Perry played an early Warped Tour before she was famous.
Yes, because I remember way back in the day, she dated the guy from Gym Class Heroes. Mm-hmm. And they might have been doing that too, but no,
they were,
really
and so
cool.
Kev put them on. Yep, L7. Yeah. One of my favorites was I was doing a Warped Tour one year, and Bad Religion were playing. They were headlining.
And I like Bad Religion.
Love Bad Religion, and Rancid played, and Rancid and Bad Religion on this place went bonkers, man. But NERD were also playing, and Pharrell, you know, people knew him as NERD, but he's not the Pharrell that everybody knows now. Yeah. So I'm standing with Pharrell. We're just beside stage, and I'm about to interview him. And this punk rock band called Total Chaos are playing. Big, pink mohawk. And somebody in the crowd was acting a fool, and the lead singer of Total Chaos with the mic jumped off the stage into the crowd and just started feeding this fan.
Oh, God.
Who was misbehaving. And Pharrell looked at me like, what's going on? And I had my arms crossed, and I didn't flinch because I'd seen, I've had my head kicked in at shows, so I know what it's like. And I just looked at him, I said, dope, dude, it's punk rock, man. He's like, this is crazy. So somewhere at Much Music, there's a clip of me doing an interview with Pharrell, and he sees the Total Chaos guy, and he brings him into the interview. The Total Chaos guy has no idea what's going on. Like, no idea what's going on. He's like, my man just beat the shit out of somebody. It was so much fun. The Warped Tour was so much fun. The guy who got hit, as I understand it, was causing enough trouble that it was warranted. It was warranted, as I understand it. I've seen that a few times at those shows. And Warped Tour, the punk shows were so great. I got kicked in the head at a Cro-Mag show in Brooklyn. And I remember my face was just spinning, and the fights around went, man, this is the best. This is the best.
Oh, yeah. Back in the day, Warped Tour. Did you ever go to Edge? Great. You must have gone to Edgefest.
I was because I worked at the Edge. So I went to Edgefest before I worked at Much Music. I remember being at Edgefest. Foo Fighters played and
wow.
crucified a guy on stage. They nailed a guy, right? So Paul from Moist came on. They nailed a guy to a board through his hands with nails. And I was watching this thinking, how do you follow a crucifixion? How do you follow? So the next band up was Green Day. Trey Cool set the stage on fire, set the drum kit on fire, set the stage on fire. And the smoke is rising and, the vapor's in the air. And Billy Joe is wearing just like a cheetah print G-string, leopard print G-string, which I don't know which cat it was. And he's out in the crowd singing, I hope you had the time of your life while the place is burning. And I just remember thinking, this is the coolest thing ever. This is the coolest thing ever.
Yeah.
Rancid played. I saw, that's where I interviewed Courtney Love for the first time. Was at an Edgefest show.
What was that like?
This was back when Courtney was a little bit more together. Courtney is that's a whole other podcast. But
Yeah.
but Courtney was very intimidating to a lot of people, and I was very new in radio. Not new in radio. I was new in music radio. I was new at the Edge, and so the music director Neil Mann and he wanted to do the interview with me. I had not done a lot of interviews. I'd only done sports interviews because I used to be an NBA reporter before I worked at the Edge. So I was an NBA reporter. And Courtney, I was able to get into it a little bit with her, and she was down. Courtney was pretty strong back then, and we had a really good conversation. And so I think that was the beginning of me realizing how to do it. And Melissa Oftemar, whom I love, just put in a book,
Oh my gosh. Yes.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's funny. I don't know when you won't be able to see this, but I don't know when you're going to air this. But today, the day that we're actually recording this, is the 25th anniversary. Today, it was me and Melissa Oftemar. You can't see it, but we were at the Summit of the Americas, the Free Trade of the Americas Agreement riots and protests in Quebec City, where we were all getting tear gassed. It happened today, and I was there with Melissa Oftemar and Propagandhi and Jello Biafra and this young guy who used to host the New Music before me. It was him, then Byron, then me. That guy just got elected leader of the federal NDP, Avi Lewis. So we were all there at the Summit of the Americas 25 years ago, right now. Right now.
Wow.
That's crazy.
Oh my goodness.
Wow. Again, like the stories you have, George. Oh,
I got tear gassed heavily, and Jello Biafra saved me. He pulled me out of an alley, pouring water in my eyes, trying to help me out.
Oh my God. Yeah, I can't imagine. That's be a terrible feeling.
It was such a fun experience, but being tear gassed is absolute hell. Being a part of an uprising, if you believe in it, which I do, that part's exciting. But tear gas is brutal. Brutal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the cops,
we know you.
Yeah, and they misbehaved. They hurt a lot of people. They hurt a lot of people during that experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you kept in touch with Melissa Oftemar? Do you talk to her still?
We were sending messages to each other about a month ago.
Oh, nice.
So
Awesome.
yeah. Not every day, but she's Madam X, man. She's it. I love her.
No.
Yeah.
So, of course, our podcast is Girls Like Rock too. So we also have to ask, because from what I've seen on your social media feed, it seems like you're really tight with Shirley Manson.
Yeah, Shirley and I, we're down. Shirley is awesome. I hadn't seen Shirley since the 90s. 2000s, I had interviewed her. But we hadn't been in touch. We were just living our lives. And then when I got the Apple Music show, they pitched me Garbage, and I was like, yeah, totally. And so Cheryl and I reconnected there. Well, we had reconnected on Instagram before. Yeah. But somewhere out there, Shirley is wearing my shirt, because I was wearing a shirt one day at an interview, and she liked it, my shirt. So I rode my motorcycle to the studio that day. So I just took my shirt off and gave it to her. And then I was wearing my leather jacket over my bare skin, which is really uncomfortable. But so somewhere out there, Shirley's got one of my shirts. Yeah, we're tight. We love each other.
Yeah, she's
awesome.
just,
she's amazing.
She's so cool.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. We love her here.
She's ferocious, relentless, an advocate in the best way. She can still slay. She's got no time for bullshit, but she's learned. She's grown, she said. She's seen things in ways she couldn't have imagined before. She is, Shirley Manson. I mean, one of one. One of one. We're talking, this is like polystyrene era kind of rock and roller. This is the Slits kind of rock and roll band. You know, this is Bam Bam. Every generation you'll get one person, and we've had Shirley for so long.
Yeah.
We've had Shirley for so long. Shirley never played along. Never played along. We'll get artists who'll break big, and you'll feel like there's something, and then they inspire a generation of young girls to be something, and then these singers go and become MAGA, right? Like The Great Betrayal. And so, like Gwen Stefani, and which is a great betrayal for many people. They do not know what to do with their feelings around Gwen Stefani. And there's a lot of artists, men and women, who do that. Kid Rock's one of them, who is a voice for the Kid Rock. Oh, a cardinal just landed on my window. Oh, that's so nice. Haven't seen a cardinal in a long time. But it's right there. I wish I could turn the camera and show you. It's so beautiful. But like these artists they forget what their role is in the culture. Not Shirley. Shirley's kept it. Some of my favorite metal bands, singers have gone MAGA, and you look at them and go, what are you doing? Like, you're about the people who've been abandoned. Just because you may not feel abandoned now doesn't mean there are not abandoned people. And you are to maintain I stand for the abandoned. That's what I believe. I stand for the community. And Shirley never betrayed that.
No.
And she gets a lot of hell for what she did. For what she does. She gets a lot of hell.
Yeah.
But I love her. Love her.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know. It's like she's the whole package. She makes great music.
Yeah.
She's well spoken. She's not afraid to speak up for what she believes in.
Yeah.
And she still rocks.
She does.
If you've seen her live too, she'll berate you if you think like she does not let the crowd off easy. This is another thing I really like about Shirley Manson. She has expectations of the audience. I think that's great.
Yeah, Sarah and I saw her, Sarah, 4 years ago now with Alanis Morissette.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Was that
like,
did you have Cat Power on that show too?
No, unfortunately not.
Yeah,
no.
God, I love Cat Power. Sean
She's
Marshall.
really cool.
Oh, so cool.
Yeah. But no, as soon as she came out with this like bright pink hair on stage.
Oh my God, so cool.
Yeah, and they started playing, I think it was Vow, and it was just like, wow, you are still so cool.
Yeah.
Oh my God. I saw them play at the Phoenix Concert Theater in Toronto one night, and they came on stage. I don't know if they opened with Push It, but they came out and the place just blew up.
Yeah.
It was so exciting. Oh my God. Best show I ever saw there though, at the Phoenix. It wasn't, but Garbage were great. They had been off for a couple of years. It was so packed in that room. There was no walkway to the back. It was just wall to wall. It was jammed in the Phoenix Concert Theater. And this band goes on stage, and the lead singer gets to the microphone, and all he says is, "We're Rage Against the Machine. We're a band from Los Angeles, California. Testify." And that's the last thing he said to the audience. And they just ran through the Battle of Los Angeles.
Oh, man.
I don't know if I've ever felt anything quite like that in that moment. It was just out of this world.
Yeah. I love when people share their concert stories like that. It's so exciting to hear.
Yeah.
Even
Yeah.
years
So
later,
fun.
you
Oh,
still
for
feel that
sure.
same
Yeah.
excitement, eh?
Yeah, I really do.
Yeah.
I really do. Oh, I went to see Limblifter play a couple nights ago in Toronto. It was so great.
Oh, cool.
To hear
Oh,
them
wow,
play
they're still
Tinfoil.
around.
Wow.
They're back now. They're back.
Oh, nice.
They were away for a while. Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
How was that?
Great. And to hear them play Tinfoil again, well, I hadn't expected that. You know, Ryan Dahl singing Age of Electric songs, Remote Control. Oh, my God, it was so great. It was so great. Jeremy Taggart from Our Lady Peace, the drummer, is now the drummer for Limblifter, and he can hit like a demon. So it was just really great.
Oh, wow.
I love the 90s nostalgia and going to these shows and seeing all the 90s stuff.
It's so great.
Yeah.
It's fun.
Oh, gosh. Okay, well, we just wanted to say like a huge thank you
Oh
for
my
your
gosh.
time.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for
It
having
was
me.
such a privilege to have you here in our space. We are so honored that you agreed to meet with us. We
No,
have
happy to
just
do
a
it.
few quick little questions to end.
Ask whatever you want. Ask whatever you want.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So what's your favorite Oasis song?
Cigarettes and alcohol.
Nice.
Hey, good one. Good one.
I like that.
All your dreams are, but no, the line, I was looking for some action when all I found was cigarettes and alcohol.
Oh,
I was a big
I love
T-Rex
it.
fan too, so hearing that melody reminded me of T-Rex. So yeah, cigarettes and alcohol, my favorite song.
Good
Nice.
choice. So Blink-182 or Green Day?
Oh, I mean, it's Green Day.
Okay. Nice.
Yeah,
Nice.
yeah,
Nice.
yeah. But
Your favorite? Oh, go ahead.
it's practically a tie.
Oh,
Yeah,
practically
probably
a
would
tie.
be for Katie too.
that's kind of me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
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 I
Hard
think
to
Blink
choose.
are out of this world. I interviewed them on that first record when they came to town. I've known them a
cool.
long time.
Did
I
you?
Yep, yeah. And I interviewed them just as Travis had just joined the band. He was just this brand new kid, just joined the band. I remember his
wow.
band
So
called the
cool.
Aquabats because I'd seen Aquabats play at Warped Tour before. So
Okay.
Blink were really funny, really sweet. I ended up doing, when I worked at Apple for all those years, I worked with Mark Hoppus. He had a show there too. So I'd crossed paths with Mark. He was a good dude, just a good dude.
They just
Yeah.
seem like nice guys. Like,
Yeah.
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 I just read
Yeah.
Mark's book and just a down to earth nice guy.
Yeah.
Yeah. And dude, all this alien stuff that people talk about now, Tom is a reason why the government's admitting to a lot of this. Tom
Yeah.
is a reason why they're doing it. So
Yeah.
they're amazing. Blink are
I'm
amazing.
a huge Tom DeLonge fan, so I won't go
Oh,
on and on
yes.
about that. But no,
dude,
yeah,
Angels and
I
Airwaves,
think
like
he's
all
smarter
their
than
bands.
people think.
Yeah.
He is. You know what's cool about Tom, I think, is he's open.
Yeah.
Tom is
Yeah.
open and he's honest and he's thoughtful. I love, all his side projects are amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm a big fan. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
Rancid,
that's awesome.
of all the punk bands that were like the bands on the radio and with videos, like my favorite punk band of all time, of course, is The Clash, The Pistols, Misfits, Propaganda. But of those bands that were on the radio, Rancid's my number one
Okay.
by 100 miles.
Nice.
And then Against Me, I love Against Me.
Oh, Against Me.
yeah.
Yeah.
You
I used to
were a
listen to them a
fan.
lot.
Yeah.
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 Oh, nice. Who is your favorite Canadian band?
Propaganda. Propaganda,
Nice.
Neil Young, Jersey, The Deers, but
Oh, nice. Wow.
a band called Grade, a band called Trigger Happy, the Almighty Trigger Happy, a band called Danko Jones, a lot of them. But
Danko
Yeah.
Jones. I remember them. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
yeah, I like them a lot. But I think Propaganda are Neil Young and Propaganda are my top two.
Nice. Did you ever listen to SNFU?
Course.
I didn't find out
Loved.
they were. I felt like a dummy. I didn't find out they were Canadian until not that long ago.
So SNFU, when I was a kid, there were these 3-4 bands that were so volatile that we were really, like, there was a band called, so the SNFU is one, they came a little later, Dayglow Abortions, Forgotten Rebels, and Teenage Head. Teenage Head were first. Those bands were so crazy, so insane live, but SNFU, Dayglow, Forgotten Rebels, No Means No, some had good politics, some had not so great politics, but they were out of this world. Canadian punk rock, Toronto is up there in the New York-London conversation. Whereas New York started it, London made it matter in the social context. Toronto was right there. And then Vancouver with DOA. DOA is another one of my favorite Canadian bands. But DOA were a little bit more Bad Religion-y, and they were, Bad Religion were a little bit more DOA-y in that they were very socially conscious. It's a mix of punk rock and professor kind of vibe, politics. But before I grew into, my late teens where I thought, oh, we should be about society, when I was anti all this, when I was much more about trouble, SNFU, Dayglow Abortions, Forgotten Rebels, holy shit. Forgotten Rebels had a song called Surfing on Heroin that made my mom cry when I listened to it.
That says
So
something.
gnarly. Yeah.
For sure. So final question for you. Knowing what you know now in your career, if you could go back to maybe your time at Much and redo like one interview, is there one that you would want to redo?
There's 100 I would redo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's 100 I would redo. But no, you know what? Honestly, there's only like one or two. There was once one interview that I was going to do, and the boss asked me what my first question was, and I told them. And then my boss told me I couldn't ask that question as my first question, and so I didn't. And I have regretted that my whole career. I should have just done it. But I was new in TV. I didn't know she had another situation, I guess, that she didn't want me to ask that question. And I could see now that it was political bias and political influence, but it was my first TV show, so I didn't really know. I was listening to my boss. So she said to me, don't ask that question first. And I didn't.
Okay.
And I regret it my whole career. I would just go back. It might end my TV career, but who cares? I would ask that question. Yeah. And then so that one for sure. No, and the other ones that went horribly wrong, the video is so cool of the fights that it helped me in the end. So I wouldn't, maybe I'd only change one.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's good. That's pretty nice to have for your career.
Definitely.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean I shouldn't change more. I probably should, but there's only one in particular that, because it's all part of the journey, right? You learn. There are a lot of interviews I walked out of thinking that wasn't very good. I didn't do a great job in that, but I needed to go through that experience to learn how to get better for the next time. So I couldn't have done the talk show where I interviewed all those people if I hadn't gone through this.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
For sure.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Oh
Thanks
my goodness,
again.
George. Thank you so much.
This means so much to us, truly.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me.
Really
I appreciate
your
it.
time.
Congratulations on the podcast.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
That is our interview with the one and only George Stroumboulopoulos. We hope you enjoyed that as much as Katie and I enjoyed being a part of that. It was such a privilege to have him on our podcast and to share all of his stories and his love and passion for music, which Katie and I obviously have. And if you tune into the Girls Like Rock 2 podcast, you do as well. Thank you so much for listening. We really appreciate your time. Katie and I post a new full episode every other Friday. The podcast is currently available on YouTube and Spotify.
And we just want to remind everybody that
Girls Like Rock too.
And don't forget to hit subscribe.